So Borderlands 3 Revenge of the Cartels added a few more ways to go in and farm some of that legendary loot. Of course, Mayhem 10 is also in, and it's likely that you're going to want to go in and pretty much refarm everything. This can be quite tedious, and I can see why many people out there might not be tempted to jump in and do all of this, but if you still are on the fence and want to go in and maybe get some really fast and powerful loot, well, in this video we're gonna jump right in with some of the best methods that you can use in the new update in order to get all of that sweet Mayhem 10 loot to become as powerful as possible. So let's jump right into it, and as always, a thumbs up on this video would be super awesome. I definitely recommend starting first with your Mayhem Modifiers and making sure that you have the easy modifier called the Loot Explosion activated at all times. The reason for that is because this is an absolute must if you want to fully maximize the amount of legendaries that you might be getting from all of these enemies, especially on those higher Mayhem levels and even more so on Mayhem level 10. To verify all of this, you can check out the Mayhem page that has been added to your Echo device, so just bring that up, go on the second last page, and here is where you can pretty much activate or deactivate the Mayhem mode, increase or decrease those levels up to maximum of level 10, apply them even outside of Sanctuary 3, but most important, you can re-roll all of the modifiers from easy, medium, hard and very hard without any restriction. Just make sure that the easy one is going to be the Loot Explosion. The reason for that is because this provides a 10% chance for enemies to cause a loot explosion upon defeat, and what's best about it is that if you're instead doing a critical kill, like for example a critical hit to the head that also kills the enemy, this is going to guarantee 100% that there's going to be a loot explosion, and in the case of the badass enemies this can mean up to 3 or even 4 legendaries from one single source, so definitely something that you should pay attention to. Nonetheless, let's start with one of the first fights that you can use in order to immediately transition into Mayhem 10, and probably also one of the best if you just want overall a ton of legendaries in a very short amount of time. This is of course the Scrap Trap fight in the Handsome Jackpot DLC, and the reason I'm saying that this is probably the best out there is because all of these bots have really low HP, which means you can take them down really easily even on Mayhem 10. But what's most important here is the fact that since you're taking down enemies so fast, these will cause a ton of cartel members to eventually spawn in, including both badass enemy cartels as well as the mini bosses in the new event map. So this is gonna give you access both to a ton more legendaries as well as the new legendaries that have been added with the new event because of these mini bosses that get to spawn. So definitely an amazing method, and what you can do with this is also pretty much reset the entire fight by simply exiting the area in the backside and then jumping back in, and you're gonna see the nest spawning again and take down enemies again, and all around an amazing fight that you can do. And in just a number of minutes you're gonna see something like this, a full map filled with legendary loot, Mayhem 10 level, even when you're not fully prepared for that difficulty. Now, if you want to take full advantage of this and complete it in a shorter amount of time, I definitely recommend both weapons and builds that excel in AoE damage. Personally, I'm mostly playing Zane and Amara, so for Zane I've used the Frost build using the Redistributor SMG, which is very suited against these fights where enemies kinda tend to clamp together and yeah, you can just take them down all at the same time. Otherwise, I've also used Amara's Ricochet build, especially with the Hyper Focus SMG, another very good one for that build, or with the Recursion, which is even crazier than the previous one, especially on this map where enemies are so many and they stand so close to one another. But otherwise, there's also a number of very good weapons in the new event that are also doing a great job here, like the new RPGs, or even better, the Reflux Shotgun that's all around amazing since it has that corrosive damage and it kind of works a little bit like the Brainstormer in linking damage to multiple enemies. Nonetheless, if you're unfortunate enough to not have the Jackpot DLC, well, there is one method that you can use, and it's something that I actually used first time to kind of reach that Mayhem 10, but this is of course going into the Slaughter Shaft and kind of trying to go in and complete the first round on Mayhem 10 right away. And the reason for that is because even if you die in this case, the game is still going to keep the enemies alive, they are not going to despawn, they are still going to be there including with your loot, and you're going gonna pretty much respawn right next to these vending machines that you can also use to replenish your ammo. And you're definitely gonna use a ton of that at first, up until you start transitioning and getting better and better guns, and eventually in like a few tries you're not going to have that problem anymore. You're going to take enemies much faster, and again I recommend taking them down exclusively with headshots, or just making sure that they are constantly getting critical hits so that they die much faster and also cause those loot explosions to happen, especially against the badass enemies, since they are a lot over there and they do have high chances to drop some of those legendaries. Moving on to the third one, this is another DLC specific fight, so you will have to have that DLC number 2, but this is Tom and Sam in the Guns, Love and Tentacles DLC, and it's again one of the best fights that you can use for a few reasons. First of all, you have the teleport point right next to the fight, which means you're gonna not waste any time to get to it. Second of all, there's 2 bosses that can spawn and both of them actually drop loot, so what you can do here is to actually only take one of them down, not the other one as well, just leave one of them alive and then use the teleport point to go back, and this is going to make the entire fight respawn, including the enemy that you killed, but the loot is still gonna be on the ground. And you can do this on repeat up until you, well, pretty much get all of the loot that you need. You can repeat this as many times as you want, and it's very worth it to do so because they have a chance to both drop the new weapons in the Guns, Love and Tentacles DLC, as well as regular weapons from the base game. In this case, my recommendation is to hunt for an Anarchy Shotgun. On Mayhem 10, this is still an absolutely amazing gun to have. It still has huge damage if you know what you're doing, and you can get it very often from both Tom and Sam. Just do the method I was talking about. Nonetheless, this brings us to the fourth and final farming spot, which is none other than the last boss encounter in the Revenge of the Cartels villa map that has just been added. So once you take down all of the enemies and reach the villa, you're going to find this fountain right here that requires activation, and doing so will reveal a secret passageway towards the end boss fight with Johnny Ultraviolet. So in this case, you're just going to have to take down enemy waves up until each of the mini bosses spawn one by one. You're gonna take them down up until about half HP. They're gonna jump back in, and eventually Johnny as well as the 2 mini bosses will both jump in the arena. And from this point on, you're just going to want to take down the mini bosses and not Johnny. The reason for that is because these 2 mini bosses already drop quite a bit of loot. They will drop both their specific new loot that has been added in the Revenge of the Cartels mini event, as well as a ton of other weapons as well. So just focus on these 2, take them down. You will see them dropping quite a bit of loot over there, legendary quality. Also take down the big robot boss that spawns on the elevated position. He is going to drop some legendaries as well, and once you have done that, just let the enemies take you down and you can go ahead and respawn right back at the top next to the fountain I was just talking about, and right next to it there's also these 2 vending machines that can be used to replenish your entire ammo and go back and repeat the entire fight over and over again and still keep all of those awesome legendary drops on the ground. So you can pretty much repeat this without any interruption. You don't have to reload your game, you don't have to go at the beginning of the map if you don't want to. You can just stay in the same spot, take down those 2 mini bosses, and then let yourself get downed and killed in order to respawn at the top and jump back in and repeat the entire process. Do keep in mind that these mini bosses that spawn alongside Johnny Ultraviolet will rotate depending on whatever run you're currently in. So if you want to see a different mini boss than the ones that you're seeing right now, you're going to have to fully finish the event and then redo it from the very beginning, as this cycles through all of the 3 factions that exist in the new map. So yeah, this is what you're going to want to do if you want to farm for all of the weapons in the new event. Anyway, on a final note, eventually if you take down the big boss that spawns on one of the sides, you are going to find his legendary loot only spawning at the top, and you're not going to be able to access it with your character normally. So the best thing you can do in order to reach those legendary drops that are normally inaccessible is to pull up your camera mode, go over there and then pretty much release it and quickly press E to interact in order to take those weapons without actually having to climb all the way up. So this was one of the things that I've done in order to get the loot that I normally didn't have access to. With this being said and done, these have been all of the farming methods for today. Now if you do happen to stumble upon one that is equally as good or maybe even better than the ones that I just showed, don't hesitate to leave them in the comment section down below. In the meantime, as always, don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, as well as subscribing for more awesome content like this, and I'm gonna see you guys in the next one.